Hello, everyone. It's good to see you here today. Welcome to online worship with Melrose Unitarian-Universalist Church. I am the Reverend Dr. Suzanne Intriligator. My pronouns are she, her, and hers, and I am the minister of this congregation. Worship is a public act, and just as when we meet in our building, this worship is open to all who would join us, and it is live here from my living room. You are most welcome here, and you are welcome to connect with us further as you wish. I invite you to sign in our digital guest book. Michelle will put the link for you here in the chat room, which is probably to your right. And you can always send me an email at minister@melroseuu.org or to our church office at office@melroseuu.
Well, you know what?
Thank you. So I was saying, I invite you to sign our digital guest book or email me, email the church office, or find out more about us at any time on our website, which is, you guessed it, melroseuu.org. Again, as I say, our worship is public. If you're concerned about your identity, go ahead and change your name as it appears in the Zoom window. Perhaps use just your first name. There has been, as you know, maybe much in the news and on our networks this week about Zoom bombing. That's when rogue people come into meetings just to disrupt them. And I hear it can be quite upsetting. So if you notice something odd today, please feel free to put a note in the chat directed to the tech support, which is James Intriligator, my husband, and he can shut down disruptive people. We've taken all the precautions we can take besides closing our doors. And as you know, we don't want to do that. So if things get hectic, we may have to suspend worship and regather here in a few minutes. In the worst case scenario, watch your email and we'll create a new worship link with a password enclosed, and we'll send you an email. We can only send it to those addresses that we have for our weekly newsletter. So if you get the weekly news, and you got today's worship reminder, you'll get the new link. If not, you can subscribe or resubscribe under news on our website, melroseuu.org. For purposes of worship today, we'll keep everyone muted except our scheduled speakers. And then at the end of the service, we'll break into small groups for our virtual coffee hour. And then you'll have the chance to speak, to check in with each other and catch up. And maybe if you're a newcomer, to get to know us and let us get to know you better. For now and through the opening hymn, you can also say hello in our chat box, which is hosted by the lovely Michelle A. today. In the middle of our service, during our most worshipful time, we ask you to refrain from chatting and use the chat box only for joys and sorrows or real technical problems. For all of our church news, including the links to our upcoming Zoom events, please see your Thursday email news. We have just one church announcement today, and that is, if you are interested in deepening your spiritual life, you might consider joining one of our monthly online covenant groups that are now forming. Just fill in the form that Michelle will post into the chat box now. And if you can send it in before 8 p.m. today, we'll go ahead and create those groups. Our worship themes for the month of April are perfect for the season of Passover and Easter. They are liberation and surrender. Now, at first pass, those might seem like opposites to you, but there's a lot more at play here. Sometimes in life, to surrender to what we cannot control can liberate us. I invite you to ponder that further today. Today, we'll be commemorating the Jewish festival of Passover, which starts this coming week. As Unitarian Universalists, we hold Judaism and Christianity as important sources of our faith, along with all world religions. And we hold to no specific creed about the nature of God or Jesus. Many of us are principled atheists or agnostics, but all of us live within a culture that has strong Judeo-Christian roots. And many of us come from Jewish or Christian families and hold within us the need to revisit these rich stories and traditions from time to time, to mine them for new wisdom and to integrate them with our evolving adult spiritual perspectives. Our fourth UU principle invites all of us to embark on a free and responsible search for truth and meaning. So with all of that in mind, I call us to worship this morning with these words from my colleague, the Reverend Gretchen Haley. They were written for Passovers, all Passovers, but perhaps They are most uniquely well suited for this Passover in particular. Someone has got to be the first when the seas are stubborn and the ground and the sky are giving us only gray and gloom. Someone has to see the spring that's just below the surface, the crocus about to launch, the green in the brown grass, the path that's about to be made clear, the freedom that's calling. After the leap, the leaving behind, the letting go of everything you ever knew and anything it meant to live. It takes a reckless sort of dreaming, a courage you'd usually shrug off like it belonged to old tales of escape from Egypt or emperors, like it belonged to someone more powerful, more official, someone less filled up with grocery lists and bills to pay, marriages to manage, and all those justice reports to read. We come today to link arms, to claim a call that is collective, believing we can go together and hold each other into the deep in this journey for justice and liberation, trusting we can sing, not just at the end, but the whole way there. Feeling in our bodies this promise of something more beautiful being born. We come to remind each other we were always this brave, that we've had all we need to walk this way the whole time, that we are the ones we've been waiting for. To say to each other, let's begin now. Come, let us worship together. And now it is time to light our chalice, the symbol of our Unitarian Universalist faith. And while I do that, can we share a reading, please, from Randall? Our worship associate, Randall, has the chalice lighting reading.
For holy days on which we recall the old stories, we light the flame. For Passover, which reminds us of the courage and strength of those seeking freedom in the past, we light the flame. For Easter, which reminds us that love is our greatest challenge, we light the flame. For gathering today in this sacred space, we light the flame. For the opportunity to be together as a community, to remember the past, to plan for the future, to be alive in our present, we light the flame.
Thank you, Randall. And now, before we move to the opening hymn, I invite you, if you haven't yet, to say hello in the chat box. Do that now and then finish up. After this opening hymn, the chat box will be reserved for our joys and sorrows. Please enter there only your own joys and sorrows, not comments about any others. After the sermon, during the closing hymn, we'll open the chat box up again for general hellos. And now let us please keep muted, but sing in our homes our opening hymn, that traditional favorite when Israel was in Egypt's land. Thank you, Tara.
When Israel was in Egypt's land, let my people go. Oppressed so hard they could not stand, let my people go. Go down, Moses, way down in Egypt's land. Tell Pharaoh to let my people go. The Lord told Moses what to do. Let my people go. To lead the tribe of Israel through. Let my people go. Go down, Moses, way down in Egypt's land. Tell Lord Pharaoh to let my people go. For you the cloud shall clear away. Let my people go. A fire by night, a shade by day. Let my people go. Go down, Moses, way down in Egypt's land. Tell Lord Pharaoh to let my people go. We need not always weep and moan. Let my people go. And where these slavery chains forlorn, let my people go. Go down, Moses, way down in Egypt's land. Tell Lord Pharaoh to let my people go.
Let's move forward. Let's join together in the words of our covenant, which James will now put up so we can all read together. Love is the doctrine of this church. The quest for truth is its sacrament, and service is its prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge in freedom, to serve humankind in fellowship, to the end that all souls shall grow into harmony with the divine. This is our great covenant, one with another and with our God. And now it's time for our children's story. If you've got young ones around, please gather them around the screen. Again, this story is for everybody, and the rest of the service will be connected to it, so I invite you all to sit and listen.
Good morning, friends. Finding the perfect story to share with you all about Passover had us feeling a bit like Goldilocks. Finally, we found one that felt just right. Since libraries are closed, I wasn't able to get a copy so I could read it to you all. Fortunately, the author of the book recently did a recording of herself reading the story, so we will be sharing that with you all today. I really love the illustrations of this book, that it is told through the eyes of a child, and the rhyming couplets, which I found musical and comforting. Here is today's story, The Longest Night, as read by its author, Laurel Snyder.
Hey everybody, my name is Laurel Snyder and I am an author of many books for children, including picture books and easy readers and middle grade novels. And I have been doing some story times here online during this interesting season that we are having right now. And today I wanted to read a book to you called The Longest Night with beautiful pictures by Katya Xian. This book was published a number of years ago by Schwartz and Wade Books at Random House. And it seems very timely because it's a Passover book. And Passover is exactly 2 weeks away now, but also because it's a book about the Exodus. It's a book about the plagues that visited the Israelites and their release from them. And it seems that we are in a season right now that feels like a plague season. And we are experiencing something that someday we will look back on and remember in all different kinds of ways. And so this is a book that imagines the Exodus and imagines the plagues from the viewpoint of this little girl. And so I thought I would share it with you today. The Longest Night, a Passover Story. Every morning with the light came another day like night. In the heat and blowing sand, each gray dawn, my work began. Spreading mortar thick on stone, I built someone else a home. All around me, eyes to ground, other children trudged around. Nervous shadows glanced my way, but we never tried to play. Only monkeys and some cats ever got to run like that.
It stood strong through every dark hour and bright dawn.
Now and then, a single dove circled high and sailed above. I'd look up and watch him roam as I made my way back home, and I wondered if the air tasted fresh and sweet up there. When dusk fell, the watchful moon slowly crept into my room. Then, at once, the world was changed. Life unraveled, rearranged. First, the river bloomed and bled, stained her banks a dusty red. Ima stared across the strand at the wound that split the land, nudged me off to fill my pail from the cistern, safe but stale. Though she sang her sweeping song, something in the tune was wrong. Croaking noises filled the yard. Frogs jumped high and landed hard. Flipping, hopping through the day, caught one, but he got away. Itching, biting, awful fleas brought our masters to their knees. Strange to see them scratch and fuss, hurt and helpless, just like us. Then the wolves ran through the street, sniffing at our door for meat. That night I had dreams of claws, matted fur and hungry jaws. Ima hummed her sleeping song, but I tossed and turned till dawn. Gentle lambs and goats grew ill, bleeding, breathing hard until great dark flocks of wings above joined and circled near my dove. Like their beasts, our masters fell. Just how sick we couldn't tell. Boils and blisters, searing pain made them curse and call in vain. Then my sister set to wailing at the sky, a fire hailing. So I held her best I could, said our house was strong and good. In the distance, whirring wheat Locusts chewing in the heat, promised hunger all year long with their grinding, gnawing song. Strangely, Abba seemed to wait calmly for each harsh new fate, sat and whittled in his chair. I sat too and said a prayer. Night like blindness, thick like tar, from our windows stretched so far, we survived that longest night, one small island made of light. On the day we killed the lamb, Abba wiped his bloody hands, marked the post above the door, drank and ate, and said no more. Till the saddest sound so stark, cries like knives that split the dark, cries that found us, frozen, numb, woke us, made us rise and run. Cries that drove us to the square and the others waiting there. Everyone was waiting there. In that night so dim and cold, we all did as we were told, packed our bread in haste and flew, running from but also to. Made our way to sifting sands, scrambling feet but clasping hands, thirsting, thrilling, full of fright. None of us were slaves that night. From the mortar and disease, from the silence and the fleas, with our hungry dogs a howl, on and into next and now. On we dashed, till suddenly we came up against the sea. Ima offered up no song for the waters or the throng. None of us knew what to do. Till the sea was ripped in two. Till the sea was ripped in two. Walls of water all around made a giant rushing sound. But we charged, we raced, we ran, hurtled out from that hard land. To a sky so wide and free, full of light and room to be. To an endless sunrise spread, pink above us, gold and red. Salty spray was everywhere. Sand and sun were in my hair. How I danced along the shore, never having danced before. How I shouted by the sea, loud and long and joyfully. As we found in open air, all our voices, everywhere. And I love this picture. I love the idea that after a hard time, a time that keeps you inside or makes you scared or makes you anxious, at the end of it, something opens up, something opens wide, the sea splits, the sky opens, and suddenly you appreciate and you can dance and you can sing and you can talk and you can hug your neighbors. And our moment isn't like the moment in this book, but it resembles it. And it feels a little bit like it this spring, the sense of waiting and the sense of hardship and the sense that something better will be down the line.
What a story. Beautiful pictures and such a deep, wide story that echoes down through thousands of years to us. While I was listening, it occurred to me that I missed out today on a very important part of our worship service, the part where we greet our neighbors. So I thought before we go now into the time of prayer and meditation where we go deep, maybe take a pause before that and let's just for a minute go wide to look at our community. It's a moment, I think, where you scroll through screens, look at one another's beautiful face, see who's here, give everyone a wave. Oh, it's so great to see your wonderful faces this morning. Hi, everybody. Good morning. Hi. Hello. Oh, look at all these lovely, lovely people. Thank you. Thank you for joining us this morning. So good to see you. It's a difficult time in our lives, a difficult time in our world, and we have difficult stories to grapple with this morning. So it will be a deep worship service. But let's never forget that we're all in this together. We never have to be alone. We can be part of this beautiful worshiping community as we investigate these deep, deep stories. So now I want to bring us into our time of prayer and meditation. Each week we take time to center ourselves, to enter into a quiet space where we can reconnect with the peace of the eternal. To center ourselves, we start first with a meditative song that we sing together, and here in our homes we sing apart. Then we sit for 2 minutes of silence, and we follow that with our ritual of joys and sorrows. If you haven't yet, I invite you now to share with us a joy or a sorrow, a personal milestone from your life by typing it into our chat box. It will be read out later with just your first name and last initial by today's worship associate, Randall. As I said earlier, our worship themes for the month are liberation and surrender. How do those two interact and interplay? In our lives right now, we may feel challenged to accept this new reality, to let go of the plans we made, to live with the not knowing, to allow for all we cannot control. But deep down we know that the only way out is through, that by accepting what we cannot change, we then gain the courage to change what we can. In that spirit, I offer you today's centering song, which is called I Step Into the Flow. Take it away, Tara.
I step into the flow and then I let it go. I open my mind, my heart, and my soul. I step into the flow and then I let it go. I open my mind, my heart, and my soul. I surrender. I surrender. I surrender. I open my mind, my heart, and my soul. I step into the flow and then I let it go. I open my mind, my heart, and my soul. I step into the flow and then I let it go. I open my mind, my heart, and my soul. I surrender. I surrender. I surrender. I open my mind, my heart, and my soul. I step into the flow and then I let it go. I open my mind, my heart, and my soul. I step into the flow and then I let it go. I open my mind, my heart, and my soul. I surrender. I surrender. I surrender. I open my mind, my heart, and my soul. I open my mind, my heart, and my soul. I open my mind, my heart, and my soul.
We enter now our 2 minutes of shared silence. Every week we share with one another our joys and sorrows, the milestones of our lives. For each one today, we will light a candle, and then together we will say a prayer. If you haven't yet, please go ahead and put a joy or a sorrow into our chat box, and Randall will read it aloud for us using just your first name and your last initial. Go ahead, Randall.
Okay. So James N. says that his birthday is close. And Lillian N. is happy because we get to stay together during this time. Then we have a candle of gratitude from Lizzie B. for Carol, Nestor, and the rest of the quilting community for sewing masks for the community, including masks for the children. From Martha B., a candle of joy. Her brother in LA is now in acute rehab and recovering well. From Jean T., a candle of joy for our former church administrator, Stephanie, who has completed her radiation treatments. She's resting on her way to good health and grateful for all the love and support that she and her family have received. From Cheryl R., she asks us to keep Chris's mom, Barbara, in our thoughts since she tested positive for COVID this week and is at Melrose, Wakefield currently. A candle of joy for Connor G., as announced by his mother. Happy 21st birthday. We are so proud of who you are. We are so lucky to have you as part of our family. From Rebecca M., one of the high school peer leaders that she works with has had a recurrence of cancer. Please say a prayer for her as she faces surgery and chemo treatments. And then we have Liz B. Her mom has had 4 surgical procedures this past month. She's 87, recovering, and her sister has COVID. Liz's mom doesn't know that yet, and she prays for them both, and all of us as well. Joyce R. would like to light a candle of concern for our democracy. A big candle of joy for Al and a successful procedure. For Lorinda and James, who brought us food and food for the spirit. And Erin would like to light a candle of concern for her friend's parents in New York City, who are both very ill with COVID. Jennifer S. would like to light a candle of concern for her friends who are doctors and nurses. Garen would like to light a candle for Gloria G. Oh, this is from Gloria G. Her cousin Wendy is now symptom-free, which is wonderful news. But her mother's cousin, Wally Fernandez, passed away from the scary virus. And please pray for my friends Irene and Jonathan, husband and wife, who is a nurse and doctor, and now both are ill in New York. From Josh S., I light this for my healthcare worker. She is brave, oh joy, and on the front line of a war, oh concern. From Elizabeth Y., a candle of concern. In the next day or two, I'll find out if my 96-year-old father tests positive. He has no symptoms, but everyone at his assisted living residence is being tested. Over 28 have tested positive so far. And that's the last one. So let's light a candle for all of those for whom the joys and sorrows have not been expressed.
And I want to light one more, Randall, this is from Anne and Joe R. for Joe's brother Ed, who currently has the virus, and we pray for his recovery. Please join me in the spirit of prayer. We pray this day for the essential workers, those in healthcare or grocery stores or mass transit or sanitation, all the people at risk, the people on strike. Grant them fairness, protection, safety, comfort. We pray for all those who are sick and suffering. Grant them healing and wholeness, love and peace. May they know we are with them. We pray for our leaders that they make informed choices. Grant them courage and wisdom. We pray for ourselves, for all of us who are quarantined or separated somehow from normal life and those we love. Grant us patience, grant us comfort and creativity, grant us faith. And now, to celebrate Passover, I invite us to join together in an ancient prayer from the Haggadah, the ritual rite of the Seder dinner. On the slide that James is going to share in a minute, I will speak the words in plain text, and I invite you to keep your microphone muted, but to respond with all the italicized portions. You'll hear James reading it along with me. Long ago at this season, our people set out on a journey. On a day
no different
than this, Israel went from degradation to joy. We give thanks for the liberation of days gone by, and we pray for all who are still bound. Eternal God, may all who hunger come to rejoice in a new Passover. Let all the human family sit at your table, drink the wine of deliverance, eat the bread of freedom. Freedom from bondage, and freedom from oppression. Freedom from hunger, and freedom from want. Freedom from hatred, and freedom from fear. Freedom to think, and freedom to speak. Freedom to teach, and freedom to learn. Freedom to love, and freedom to share. Freedom to hope, and freedom to rejoice. Soon in our days. Amen. Amen. And now it is time for that piece of music called the offertory. If you are so moved during the music or after the service, you may donate to our church by visiting our church website, melroseuu.org. James, please now share the offertory.
The offertory this morning is a collaboration between me and two of my colleagues. E.B. Bromley serves as music director of First Unitarian-Universalist Church of Berks County in Pennsylvania, and Sarah DeVoe is music director of Unitarian Universalist Area Church in Sherborn, Massachusetts, and lives down the road in Malden. We'll be singing Lift Thine Eyes by Felix Mendelssohn. This trio is part of the larger oratorio that tells the Old Testament story of Elijah. At this point in the story, Elijah has escaped into the wilderness and is in great despair. Mendelssohn takes the liberty of inserting the appearance of a trio of angels who sing an adapted version of Psalm 121. Lift thine eyes to the mountains. Whence cometh thy help?
whence cometh, whence cometh, whence cometh help? Thy help cometh, 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 Lord, from the Maker of heaven and earth. He has said, thy foot shall not be moved. Thy keeper will never slumber. Lift thine eyes, oh, lift thine eyes to the mountains, whence cometh, whence cometh, whence cometh help, whence cometh, whence cometh, whence cometh help.
Thank you. That was beautiful. And now the reading and the sermon. Our reading today is from the UU minister, Reverend Lynn Unger. You may recall I shared her poem, Pandemic, a couple weeks ago. It had been shared widely on the internet and it gave Lynn a brief taste of fame. This week I share another new piece from Lynn Unger called Imagine. Imagine with me for a moment. Don't worry, I'm not saying it's real. Imagine, if you can, that there has been not a calamity, but a great awakening. Pretend just for a moment that we all so loved our threatened Earth that we stopped going on cruises, limited international flights, worked on cherishing the places where we already are. In this pretty fantasy, everyone who possibly can stops commuting, spends the extra time with their kids or pets or garden. We have the revelation that everyone needs health care, sick leave, steady work. It occurs to us that healthcare workers are heroes, also teachers. Not to mention the artists of all kinds who teach us resilience and joy. Imagine, if you will, that we turned to our neighbors in mutual aid, trading eggs for milk, checking in on those who are elderly or alone. Imagine that each of us felt suddenly called to wonder, in this moment, what does the world need from me? What are my gifts? Yes, I know it's just a fantasy. The world could never change so radically overnight. But imagine. There ends the reading. This is where I always take a drink. This past week, I was reminded of an afternoon our family once spent in the English village of Iam. Have you ever heard of it? Just for a moment of fun, I thought I would share with you a couple of photos of Iam, plus some that we took on that day 5 years ago. Please, James, would you share that? Some photos of Iam. And you can see there that our youngest, Quinn, has changed quite a bit in the last 5 years. He's 9 there. What hasn't changed much in 400 years is the village of Iam. It's a tiny village with less than 1,000 people even now. And it's quite beautiful. All the buildings are in local stone, and it's set within countryside of green rolling hills in the Peak District, which is a national park. But that beauty is not its claim to fame. In England, beautiful little Iam is known as the Plague Village. It's an amazing story, one that 5 years ago I wouldn't have known would become relevant to my own life, but there you go. In Iam, in the fall of 1665, a parcel of fabric arrived at the tailor shop, fresh from London, and as it turns out, full of fleas carrying the bubonic plague. Within a week, the tailor's assistant was dead, and everyone in his house was sick. The village panicked, and many people started to pack up so they could run away. But how could they know who was already infected? There were no tests. If people fled Iam, they might be carrying the plague to other towns and cities. So the rector, the parish minister, gathered the people and implored them, please, to make a brave choice, to quarantine themselves voluntarily, to cut off the whole village from the outside world so that they might save the rest of the region from infestation. Amazingly, the town agreed. I only wish that we had a record of what was said that day, of the conversations that were had among individual families about how they all came to this momentous decision. Over a period of 14 months, the people of Iam kept entirely to themselves. They held church services in an open field with families standing yards apart from one another to keep safe. They placed large stones near the town's borders, and those stones are still there today. The villagers would come there and leave coins or other valuables. And then hours later, people from neighboring villages would come and trade the coins for food. Iam lost something like half of its population in that year. One woman, Elizabeth Hancock, lost her husband and all 6 of her children in a period of 8 days. She had to bury them all by herself. And yet, despite all the suffering, the quarantine stood. The village lived up to its promise, keeping itself closed off until the plague died down. And in the process, these simple, regular people saved untold thousands of others. They flattened the curve, and their story lives on. I wonder what it can mean for us. At this moment, people all over the country and all over the world are pondering the meaning of our current crisis, this disease, this plague that has come upon us. I was stopped in my tracks this past week by an essay authored by the biblical scholar and activist, Reverend Dr. Liz Theo-Harris. She is the co-chair with Dr. William Barber of the National Poor People's Campaign, which over the last 2 years has traveled the nation, raising awareness about escalating inequality and our government's complicity in that, which they call policy violence. From a faith perspective, plagues are not about punishment, contends Theo-Harris. They are about awareness. This is the truth of the disasters of the Bible, including plagues, she writes. They tear down flimsy, false narratives to expose the foundations of injustice, unquote. Our current crisis, according to her and the Poor People's Campaign, is laying bare in an inescapable way the deep divisions in our country between rich and poor, between those with health insurance and those without, between those who can afford to stay safe at home and those who must go out to work. The crisis is exposing a healthcare system on the brink of collapse after decades of budget cuts and privatization and a focus on profits over patients and public health. We are seeing, in stark reality, the truth that 140 million people in America, nearly half of the population, are either already poor or were, until recently, just one healthcare crisis or one missed paycheck away from poverty. And now, thanks to the virus, that healthcare crisis or missed paycheck is here now. In the coming weeks, that last thin barrier will break and millions more of us will fall into poverty. How is this fair or just? What happened to the American middle class? What meaning can we make of all of this? Theo Harris concludes her essay. She says, "Plague in the Bible is not a storm weathered before a return to normalcy," she writes. "It is a call to come together in new ways in order to survive. Hold the powerful responsible for their unjust policies and the lies they've told to cover up injustice, and rebuild on foundations of love and justice," unquote. I was pondering this essay last week when my mind, by necessity, turned to the great story of Passover, which Jews the world over will celebrate this coming week. And Theo Harris's analysis holds true for the plagues in that story as well, for there God had to try again and again to raise Pharaoh's awareness, to show him the grave injustice he was creating and holding up, to try to convince him to release the Hebrew slaves. And every time Pharaoh refuses in the stories, the plague gets worse and worse until finally the Egyptians are just broken as a people and the slaves can go free. But even then, Pharaoh sends his army after them to the edge of the Red Sea, and there the waters part, so the story goes, and the Hebrews have to take that great walk of faith along the suddenly, surprisingly dry sea floor. Even then, after they've arrived on the other shore, even then the Jews have to wander in the desert for 40 more years, enduring more hardship and anxiety before getting to the promised land. It was not easy for them, this great escape. Even with all the powerful magic and huge feats of faith, the road was never easy for them. And ever since, it never has been. And still, they persevere. They persevere. Did you know that the Passover Seder, as we now know it, was not invented until after the time of Jesus? As you recall, on Palm Sunday, which many Christians around the world are celebrating today, Jesus was coming into Jerusalem with thousands of others. It was the custom then, in fact, it was required practice for Jews to travel to Jerusalem from across the world so that they could do their Passover sacrifice at the Holy Temple there. But something happened in 70 AD that changed all of that. The Romans destroyed the temple, and the Jews were devastated. According to legend, during that time, the Jews struggled to preserve any artifacts at all of their faith. They even had to smuggle a prominent teacher, the Rabbi Yohanan ben Zakkai, out of Jerusalem in a coffin to hide him from the soldiers. Once outside the city, however, that rabbi was part of founding the first rabbinic academy, which then helped the Jewish people to reformulate their faith for a new age. Then they created rituals like the Seder, which occur in the home, not the temple, so that Judaism could become portable and therefore survive long centuries of displacement and persecution. Out of that destruction, thanks to Rabbi Yohanan and his coffin, Judaism was reborn and restored and made resilient. So resilient that it survived the Roman Empire and 1,000 pogroms and even the Third Reich. The lesson here is that empires fall. Over time, when injustice becomes too much, too huge for the system to carry, something shifts. Foundations crack, leaders tumble, and chaos ensues. But time and time again, throughout human history, the people, at least some with their stories and rituals and their memories, survive. the good in them survives, and then it rises up and rebuilds and restores, and there is another chance and a better chance. In the eternal story of Passover, it occurs to me just now, this year, to ask, which side are we on? Are we the Jews or the Egyptians? Are we the liberated, the liberators, or the liberated from? I wonder, when the current empire of injustice crumbles, on which side of the sea will we be standing? Imagine with me for a moment that there has been not a calamity, but a great awakening. We have the revelation that everyone needs health care and sick leave and steady work. Imagine that each of us felt suddenly called to wonder in this moment, what does the world need from me? Like the people of Iam, the English plague village, we are now all of us stuck in self-quarantine, pondering the meaning of our lives, weighing the value of our lives against that of others. Or maybe, just maybe, we are learning to weigh the value of our lives with others. For that is, of course, the only way that our lives hold meaning and value, in relationship, in purpose, in connection. Imagine with me for a moment that there has not been a calamity, but a great awakening. What if in this telling, this time around, we have been the slaves and we have been bound in service to the wrong master and the wrong values? What if somehow all at once we have been cut loose, set free from what we knew before? What if we are being passed over, some of us this time, only to be tested further, to have to walk in faith across the sea floor, to wander again through another desert? But what if the story is true? What if there is truth out there? What if there is somewhere, past all our imaginings, a new land, a promised land where generations from now, the good will be forever restored and raised up, and our true values made real, the earth made fair and just and fresh and green again? What if? What if? What if there has been a great awakening? So may it be. If you will, please join me in our closing hymn, which is all about these great struggles of faith, called Come and Go With Me. Tara, will you show us that hymn, please?
There'll be singing in that
Looks like the chalice put itself out for us today. Join me, please, in the benediction. Like the slaves in Egypt or the people of I Am in England, we come here to find strength in one another. It takes a reckless sort of dreaming to link arms and go together into the deep, feeling in our bodies this promise of something more beautiful being born. We come to remind each other we were always this brave, that we've always had all we need to walk this way the whole time, that we are the ones we've been waiting for. So may it be, and amen.